So basic soldering is probably the easiest thing that you can do if you know how to do it right. So you really only need some solder and use rosin core for electronics. If you're using just bare metal, brass, or you're doing lead, copper, zinc type stuff, and electronics aren't involved, you use acid flux. And acid flux it's a different kind. There's water soluble acid flux now, but for electronics, always use rosin. And you'll see it will say rosin core. This is pretty big diameter wire, but it's fine for doing larger stuff. Lasts a really long time. You don't need a lot. If you want to do very small components, use a smaller wire. So just for doing like speakers and stuff and large through-hole component stuff, this is fine. You just got to be quick with it to not put too much out. So you need an iron. This is already heated up, but it heats up quick. So I use the wire brush, and my wire brush is pretty dirty now, but you just kind of wipe the tip off in there, and it cleans it so it stays non-oxidized. This is a nice Heiko stand, and here's the station. I think the station I got on Amazon for like $40. You can set the temperature, and it's pretty accurate. There are trim pots back in here. If you open it up, you can adjust it to be dead on, but it's got hot air. So there's a hot air gun if you want to do heat shrink tubing, which is amazing. I would definitely recommend getting some kind of hot air. And this is all digital. This is a pretty decently made station. There are some that are real crusty. Anyways, so you can get paste, you can get flux in a syringe, you can get a flux pen. It doesn't matter. I find this the easiest and it's the cheapest, so why not? So I'm just gonna use this as like a tool to apply the flux or paste or whatever you want to call it. It just stops the metal from getting oxidized while the heat's applied and makes it flow better. So if I want to take off this old stuff, I'm just going to put a little bit of pressure on here, and I'm going to heat the joint, and then it should come off there. And as you can see, maybe it looks a little spindly there, and that's because it got oxidized while I pulled it out. All the rosin burned off. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same for this one. There we go. Now, these have little holes in the wings here, and since I'm using this horseshoe tip, I can go ahead and clean the solder off, and then I can just weld it up onto the iron again to remove it. I don't have to use a wick, so I recommend the horseshoe tip. Chisel is good too if you're used to the chisel. Chisel lets you have a little more versatility. If you're trying to do components on a board, you can turn the chisel sideways to get in more narrower areas. But for multi-purpose stuff, I highly recommend the horseshoe, and it has the most thermal mass too. So you can really apply a lot of heat quick and do very fast soldering. Plus you can use it to tin multiple components. You just drag it across and it holds a ton of solder in that little well in the middle. Alright, so this is all clean and everything. So I can these are already tinned, but let's say they weren't. I'll go ahead and chop these off. This is just electrical pliers, reflex. Yeah, these are very common. So you got to get ones that has the right kind of gauge for the wire that you're stripping, and use the correct size jaw. If you go too small, it's going to cut the strands. Alright, I got rosin on the wire here, so it's all slick. Anyways, twist the ends a little bit. It just makes it easier to manage so the strands don't come apart when you stick them in there. So you need to tin the tips of the wire first, makes it easier. That way you don't have to put so much heat on the components. And for this kind of stuff, it's pretty basic. Just make sure you have a little solder on the tip. If you don't, touch the tip to the solder to get it on there. So you just want to heat it up, and then you just want to touch the rosin in there. You can do it either way. I mean, I already have this is oxidized here. I can always just dab a bit onto the iron and it will reflow it. So do that to both wires. Heat up the wire, and then you bring the solder to the wire, not to the iron. Once the wire gets hot enough, it will melt, and then it will tin the wire. So there we go. So I'm going to go ahead and put these in. And again, I'll use a little paste here. It just makes it easier. The more flux you have, the better. So I'm going to go ahead and touch this to the base here. And make sure you don't touch the magnet or heat up the magnet, because heat demagnetizes stuff, and it will ruin whatever you're working on if it's sensitive. Alright, there we go. Alright, I opened up both the holes, so I'm just going to go ahead and feed this in there and then twist it back so I can make sure that it's got something to hold on to. So I would recommend tweezers, or you can get these little needle nose electronics pliers that are rounded. They're pretty good for bending wire, because when you twist them, it bends the wire in a circular shape. It sounds like my light is failing. Wonderful. Alright. So go ahead and bend that back around. Now, same thing, I don't really need to add any more solder. I could add a little, I guess. You want this not to move, so you can do the old school method where you just put some tension on the wire like this with the pliers. Heat it up. And then it should take the wire once it gets hot enough. There it goes. And then you want to wait until it dries here, cools down. And I'll do the same on the other side. I'll wrap it through here. Put some tension here. I just need to heat it up and then solder in there. And that's it. Very simple